Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Disc Guidance, and in this case, also a Robotics Lab segment with the 2MK team. Today we are, of course, showing off a new bot, but the bot we're showing off is just one this week. For the last 3 weeks, I believe, we have done at least 2. But we're going to do just one today, and also put a little more effort into explaining how bots work and why they're built the way they are, and in case you want to come up with anything on your own, this should probably be a bit more helpful to you than our previous streams where we were more or less rushing through everything. We are doing Jury for today, and the purpose of Jury Bot is the same as it was of our Jury Bot in Street Fighter V, namely to give you a bot that we can just use to practice knockdown pressure, also known as meaties or oki, depending on where you come from or who you talk to, I guess. We're going to be doing this without the primary part of it at first, but since the bot itself is actually relatively easy to input, there shouldn't be too much difficulty in getting it to work. So, aside from the last input, which is a nightmare, you can kind of see it on the screen right now. That is Action 8, and it is quite a nightmare. But it's not as vital for it to be so perfectly input, and therefore we're going to go in our usual rhythm for bots. I'm going to explain in brief detail why the bot is built the way it is and what your goals with it are. Possibly show off a bit of the CPU and explain why we are using it or not using it in specific ways, and then go into inputs and point systems, very specific, before we go into discussions of other things. For the purposes of this, therefore, I will be going through the inputs relatively quickly, and then going through them again with a larger explanation as to why they're the way they are from the bot theory perspective. So it'll take us a little bit longer to get to the point where I'm talking about the point systems and the very specific parts of the bot. So, if you're not familiar with the concept of oki or knockdown pressure, it's fairly simple. You get some amount of advantage when you knock your opponent down with any move, and once you've got that advantage, you should then try to get closer to them if you want this to be the thing you do, and see if you can use an attack that they really can't do too much about, that they probably have to defend against or use an invincible move to escape. Any other option will normally result in them losing out because they just can't beat you having done that. Shui has always been a good bot for this because she has a lot of options and a lot of positioning that helps her out with it. So we simply applied the same principles from the old Street Fighter V Jury bot to this new bot, though the actual outcome is a little different. If you don't have any experience with knockdown pressure for your character in this game, or any other really, if you're used to just doing it the standard way of walking up to your opponent and figuring out what you want to press and hoping that it works, this is still a useful bot for you, because what it helps you with is understanding why you lose out when you do that. But in order to get that advantage fully, you have to learn to use this frame meter that the game gives you, at least somewhat. And unfortunately, it's not actually that easy to use because of the way that the game gives you the data about your advantages. Within a bot, it's less helpful, basically. So I'll show you briefly how that works and then go into other aspects of it. The bot is almost entirely about getting that check done. Do I have advantage? You'll see if you watch the part on the upper section of the advantage screen, for example there, if you're doing something at the moment that your opponent gets back up, it can sometimes show you how much advantage you've got. We're not really sure why it doesn't always show this, but it may be just that you can't just stand there and get the information, you have to dash or something. And often you probably want to press something else. So we're still working on the exact aspects of it. Maybe it just isn't showing it because it shows it for too short a time, and in certain cases it just passes the, what we'll call polling, so that it never has time to show you. And that of course makes it difficult to actually use for much while fighting the bot. But since you can just turn the bot off and check the information yourself anyway, it can be more helpful. So if I hit Jury with Chun-Li's sweep, it gives me a number because Jury is no longer doing anything. I know there are 33 frames for that. If I hit sweep and then just mash dash, I get 14 frames. The reason for that being that Chun-Li's dash is 19 frames long. Basically meaning that if I do this and then just mash dash twice, information changes based on whether or not it counter hits as well. Which is fairly important to know. So let's change that too, so that you know how to do all of this very complicated testing if you really want to. We're changing it to standard counter, meaning that this will never counter hit. And you'll notice that now I am different amounts of negative on these dashes. Which meant that if Jury were to get up and press an attack, and I also pressed an attack, I would probably lose. I'm going to leave this as random for now. This is not important to the bot. It's just there so that we can demonstrate some things later. The point is that if you want information on how your knockdowns work and how much advantage you have, the bot actually being active is not the best time to get that information. You simply do the knockdown you expect and hope for the best. "24 frames is enough to dash once, but would put me fairly far away from her," and so on. So let's go back into why the bot works the way it does and what you want to do with it. Jury's going to jump, and she's also going to use her pinwheel uppercut. And in general, when she does either of these things, you want to hit her. Once you've hit her, that's it. The next thing to do is to actually get a knockdown and use the knockdown that will lead to you having advantage. Once she's burnt out, she'll use her sweep as well. And that is another timing where you have to recognize that's happened, get your knockdown, and get whatever advantage you need. So we know from before that this was 24 frames. So if I'm in the corner much closer to her and I dash forward after doing it, I'll have an advantage on her. If you're paying really close attention or are already familiar, you'll probably know what your knockdown is. But the important part of the bot is not knowing the knockdown so much. It is the same as the Street Fighter V version. When you try to get close to Jury to do these pressure options, she's generally encoded to keep doing any number of different things. Everything from wake up parry to wake up neutral jump, wake up block, wake up uppercut as just demonstrated. Sometimes she'll just backdash, sometimes she'll hit like light punch or light kick, and sometimes she'll drive impact. This bot is built to do the maximum number of things within the optimal timing we could work out. Because of this, you probably need to check it yourself whether or not there's anything you can do off of any specific knockdown or any specific position. She's also one of the bots where we actually set this setting, drive gauge recovery settings P2, to standard and not to any form of actual recovery, because we want Juri to enter the burnout state fairly often. This is to help you slightly with the matchup as well, because so far what we've seen is that she's one of those characters that uses a lot of drive rush, and that would normally mean that if you could punish her correctly for doing it, she'd be very close to burning out a lot of the time. Once she is burnt out, you can get a lot more. She's also fairly good at getting away from other things you might want to do. But because you have so many options, we don't necessarily suggest using this bot unless you're at least somewhat familiar with the concept of this already. One thing we do know though is that if you are using the CPU instead, either level 6 or 7, she's slightly less dangerous in most situations. She's relatively good at showing you small things in the Juri matchup, but this character is usually built to do things quickly and mess with your reactions. If you are decent at dealing with that, then you probably don't have a lot she can cause. Aside from the fact that this is the bot we should have tested first, or rather the CPU that we should have tested first, when we were going through all of those previous discussions about whether or not Street Fighter V CPU reads your inputs. Because Juri is the one that has convinced us that yes, definitely the CPU, at least at level 7, does read your inputs outright. Level 6 is a little stranger because it more so fights oddly, so you can't be sure, but it's also because it fights oddly you can't gain as much from it. This is another thing that comes up simply because the style of character doesn't really work out well. If she didn't make some mistakes, then she would be much harder. But if she doesn't read your inputs, then she's not really that threatening. She tends to just walk up to you, she doesn't necessarily avoid projectiles or so on. And we start to feel as if her accuracy is pretty low outright. But this is another very specifically important thing, because a bot that reads your inputs is the worst possible option for training your wake-up pressure. It's not actually telling you anything about what you are or are not doing. Fortunately, the CPU is a good way to train to get a little bit of extra information about your knockdowns. For example, seeing that 20 frame one that probably flashed on the screen for just a moment after the Kiko show knockdown we just did. But now we're going to move into the discussion of the actual inputs. And again, I'm going to go through them very quickly at first, so that if you're reviewing this later, you can just check this section and grab them. And then I'm going to go into them in more detail. JuryBot is fairly easy to input. We've had at least 2 people test it, and I basically threw it in about 10 minutes because it's about principles, and that's the thing I'm going to be talking about therefore. But principles come second. First of all, I'm still not used to this part. There we go. Replaying action 1 now. It is 9, i.e. up, forward, forward, down, forward, the whole thing, and end. That's it. You're generally trying to do this with the jury still in the air. 20 frames is actually slightly too fast to make jury threatening on her jumping. Getting closer to 30 would probably make her more dangerous jumping in on you. So don't try too hard to get this very quick. The forward, down, forward part should be fast, but getting it done really quickly is not really required. I may re-record this later because it's very simple, and it also will go back into explaining why that happens. Next we have her action 2, which is fairly simple as well. This is a crouching medium kick. It can be down, back, or down. The reason it's specifically down in this case is to basically show you that it works fine, even if it's just down. But this may also be re-recorded because down, back is very slightly better. While she is animating that single crouching medium kick, you're pressing up medium kick for a moment, and then pressing forward for a moment. And once you've done all that, then you just press heavy punch and end it that way. It doesn't really matter if you hold the heavy punch at the end or not. We will be looking more into the differences it makes or does not make as we go forward. But it can help to get a more of a specific thing if you hold it. And we'll be deciding whether or not that's important later. This is mostly just for letting her neutral jump out of things. Her slot 3 is also relatively simple, but it is a little difficult because it is another first frame input requirement. Fortunately, it is one of those first frame requirements where you probably don't have to worry about using the special technique for it, which will be on our bot pages by now if it's not. If you're not familiar with it, I will not be explaining it in this stream because it takes quite a while to explain and is relatively complicated to actually do. But since the only thing required after this down forward medium plus light punch on first frame is actually the throw, those 2 frames of just forward are not required. That's it. It's also fine if you're holding throw almost to the end. You can't see it here because the neutral input does go on a little bit longer and it fades into itself, but there's probably a moment of neutral at the end of it. Action 4 is also quite simple. 1 forward heavy punch, release. You can input a dash there, and then a second forward heavy punch. You're not holding the heavy punch. It's a relatively short thing. You're just pressing 1 heavy punch and quote-unquote hiding the second heavy punch's animation in it. Yes, Jury's forward heavy punch is a kick. Depending on how exactly you time this, she will forward dash more or less, and that can be adjusted based on what type of character you play and how important it is. But it ends with a quarter circle back. So, forward heavy punch, quarter circle back. It is not a particularly fast input, you don't need to rush it. Her action 5 is similar. Back medium kick, tap back twice so that she should backdash, or in this case she won't actually backdash because you are hiding the input. And then a quarter circle forward. You can test this one by replaying it with replay on. If she does this, it's correct. If she doesn't, it's wrong. Her action 6 is a little bit more complicated, but not necessarily difficult. This is down back heavy punch plus heavy kick, and this one does have to be first frame. But once again, because there's very little else that we're expecting you to press during this input, at least quickly, there's some ways to get around it. Set one button that you can easily hold on your controller or fight stick to heavy punch, and another button to possibly heavy kick plus heavy punch, and just hold the heavy punch one. Then press throw and just keep holding the heavy punch the entire time. End this with a quarter circle forward while still holding the heavy punch, and that's the end of the input. The hardest part again being to get the first frame part right, but because you can basically just hit that and then throw, there's nothing too complicated. The input method that we normally suggest for this should be okay even if you're not particularly experienced or familiar. If you can just press these things on the first frame along with the direction on your own without the assistance of basic trickery of getting the input reader, then do that. It's simple enough that you could retry it a few times and hope it works. Her action 7 is also very simple. This is again shown this way to basically prove that it works fine even if you only hold down and not down back. Generally, you'd want to do down back for this simply so that she has a tinily higher chance of blocking on wake up. It is one crouching light kick, crouching light punch, forward, down, and that part needs to be quick in terms of ending it. You don't want too many frames between pressing down and ending this recording because otherwise she'll be lacking her uppercut input. And now, the nightmarish action that is slot 8. This is easy to understand, but I'm not really sure it's easy to do. So far we've had at least one person who managed fine and another who didn't manage as well. But fortunately it doesn't need to be perfect, so let's go through it quickly. Press neutral medium punch plus medium kick and quickly do a quarter circle back. As soon as you finish this quarter circle back, again while holding medium punch plus medium kick, double tap forward, which will give you a drive rush. The drive rush cancel being seen here. And then basically do down, forward, down again. The difficult part of this is that you are best served by holding that medium kick until the end, or the medium punch until the end. You can pick one depending on which thing you need done. And we'll get into that again when we go over bots from the perspective of what it's supposed to do and why the theory is this way. That last part though is not as important, it just changes how often she can do specific things. So rather than try to explain that now, just understand that you are holding medium kick and medium punch, preferably as one button, half circle back, forward dash, and try to go forward down, down, or down forward. Anything in that general vicinity. But the key point here is to hold only one of either medium punch or medium kick as you end the input. I'm going to briefly just show you why that works specifically. If you get it right, she will generally do this. But this is so not required because she has other ways of doing her uppercut that it's really in there as an option for people who want her to uppercut a lot for various reasons. This is good for when you have safe jumps you want to test the timing of and are not sure if you're getting them, or just not really sure in general about the spacing of certain things that you might be trying to do with characters who extend throw or hit boxes, which also have long hurt boxes, into her range. Basically, if your meaties come from far away or involve jumping, you might want to try a little harder on this input. But at that point, you're probably experienced enough to manage to pull it off. But we're going to switch for a while I discuss one specific aspect of it before we go into all of the little extra things that the inputs themselves do. And therefore I'll go back to them afterward. And we're using Cammy because she does decently in neutral against Shui and has a lot of relatively well understood options on knockdown. She knows how far she can dash, which moves will lead to what, and so on. She's also good for practicing your punish counter knockdowns or punish counter combos of various things because she uppercuts fairly often. Similarly, you can get extra understanding of your advantage on knockdowns when she's burnt out, because if you can force her to block, and she should occasionally do that, then you'll know what your pressure is like. So she's not really intended to be difficult to counter. Depending on her rhythm, she'll spend quite a lot of time just taking hits. Mainly because she will overcommit to things, and you are supposed to just take advantage of that and do whatever you like. The point system is based somewhat on that, for example. In the more precise sense, you get a point for punishing her uppercut and then doing a successful wake-up attack off whatever combo you've chosen to do. Similarly, if you manage to recognize her sweep, which, assuming it's input correctly, she will only do if she's burned out. But if you do manage to recognize it and hit it and get a knockdown, then you should try for your Oki then as well. And finally, if you anti-air her like that, this is what we call scramble, because she's going to land, and depending on how you anti-aired her and when, you'll get a different combo yourself. Sometimes you don't want to go for that challenge because, again, you might just get uppercut. But even this sort of thing is meant to teach and remind you that if she's burnt out, you can be a bit more aggressive because she doesn't have the meter to do EX, i.e. invincible, pinwheel. We've explicitly not decided a last point. And part of the reason for this at the moment is that the thing we think she should be doing is challenging you in neutral. So, for many characters, Cammy included, managing to hit her with a long neutral button and getting confirms, preferably into even more knockdowns, is an important part of the game plan. And she will generally stop you from doing it. Similarly, if you've understood this range you want to stand at to cause that to happen, you'll also end up learning which of your moves you can more easily use against her. And therefore which knockdowns you will get, and which Oki you should therefore go for. And when those things change due to her burnout, you can do similar things yourself. That's a good example of it. Just clipping her legs with crouch medium kick, getting the knockdown, and once again, Oki setup. The main reason for all this is just you want to have as many positions as possible that you have an understanding of the pressure for. Not that you should always pressure people, but if you are going to do it, it would definitely help if you didn't do the incorrect pressure. The only reason we have decided to quote-unquote gate the points behind specific things in the first place and not just let you do basically any knockdown whatsoever is that it would cause slightly bad habits in the matchup, and it would probably change your focus when it comes to the bot itself. Optimizing damage in positions like this is just as helpful. So, generally, she won't do her throw except on wake up, and she will backdash some number of times. Like that. But unlike most bots where we know that she's only going to backdash once, if she has even reasonably good recording, it'll probably be some almost random number of backdashes. So we're now into how and why does she do all this? And that can be further expanded on by explaining bot theory as a whole. If you came here because you needed an Oki bot or just wondered what our jury bot was and needed some information on that front, the part of the stream you care about is probably over. We're now going into complicated bot theory things. And just for the sake of it, I will switch back to Chun-Li in case I need to any actual demonstration from that side. So let's get technical. Most bots need a jump. And in order for them to have a large number of different things that they can do during this jump, you need to either put the jump at the end of a different input where something else happened and nothing is happening after the jump. But usually you don't have enough time to get a good jump in attack if you do this. I'm going to leave these two on and replay them with repeat replay on to sort of make the point. You can see here that, as I mentioned before, because it's a 20 frame input, she does her kick attack. When she does her forward jump, she does the kick too high in the air to actually hit. Sometimes she jumps without doing anything, which we also kind of want. But in general, when she does try an attack, it whiffs. The other thing that we are therefore going to try to do when we make an input like this one, where it's just a jump, is to put in some move that if the character happened to be on the ground, if something caused the jump input to be hidden or skipped, we still want them to have the option to do a move, but we don't want to control which move they do very much. So, in general, you want the character's non-dive kick option. If you have this type of character who even has the dive kick as an option, that's what you're looking to put in here. Honestly, this can be anything. Sometimes it's a half circle back because you want them to do something else. All you care about is that the move isn't the one that they can use in the air. So in her case, we're just going forward, down, forward, because it sometimes comes out as pinwheel and sometimes comes out as something else, because the Street Fighter 6 input reader is a little interesting at the moment. Therefore, depending on what this is combined with, she'll end up doing a different jumping attack. I can make her do jumping medium punch, jumping heavy punch, the previously seen jumping medium kick, and of course, this one should be jumping heavy kick, but might not be. Part of the reason why she can do her dive kick from this in the end after all, in very, very specific situations, is related to this, because if she's exactly in the right space on the screen, the game will read the inputs differently and end up reading them as a quarter circle back so that she actually does the dive kick. But in general, this is the purpose of putting this in that way. You need a jump. You don't want to press any buttons so that she can use the maximum number of possible jump attacks. And in this case, it would be helpful if this input was actually different, namely slower. But this is a little difficult for me to do slowly, so. "30 frames. That's probably better." So now from there, I'm going to put it back to just playing these two. And let's see if we can get a better timing on the jumping medium kick. There we are. You can set it to whatever you like by just changing that input a little bit. So let's move on to why slot 2 is constructed the way it is. This one's really simple because we just wanted her to be able to do a crouching medium kick, and we didn't care too much about anything else of it. Normally, if she ends a different input while in an animation, the crouching medium kick will not happen. And because most of the animations she has are so long, the neutral jump medium kick, which is basically instant, you're not neutral jumping and then pressing medium kick, you're just pressing up medium kick. This generally is too quick to happen either. The little pause, however, means that you have enough time for that heavy punch to sometimes happen. And for that, I'm probably going to have to use this as demonstration. Let's try that one instead. Nope, wrong one actually. This was probably the better choice. Of course you wait until I do that first. The combination of the quarter circle forward at the end of Action 6 and the really early crouching medium kick means that she has the option to do medium fuha. But she'll generally only do this medium fuha. I think that's actually called something else now. When that move isn't the currently thing animating. If you're watching really quickly in the side, you might be able to see it. She's doing that move. But now that she can no longer do that, we see this instead. And she might do the medium one as well. And this is also part of why that throw is in there. So that when she's burnt out, the flow that results from her movement means that if she's close enough to you, she'll throw you anyway. But the important thing to understand was that the reason she has the medium kick there is just, we needed a crouch medium kick. It's sort of filler. The heavy punch is kind of a bonus. And, as noted, we might use that heavy punch by making you hold it until the end to change a behavior in the interaction of these two. If you got a first frame heavy punch plus heavy kick, and this had a heavy punch held until the end, she would do heavy kick when these two interact, instead of doing a drive impact. So far, for the rhythm, this isn't necessarily what we want, because a lot of other animations tend to shift things around, but we're going to choose some more checking on it, so you can feel free to try making sure that you end slot 2's input by holding the heavy punch, and see how it affects slot 6. If you get something you like, then keep it. This is the most basic possible input for a bot. We know that we need the down forward medium punch plus medium kick in order to combine with the 6-3-2, i.e. forward 2 down at the end of slot 7, so that we can get some uppercuts. These things aren't always exactly correct because certain animations don't cancel and rhythms change around a lot. But you can see what you can get from just setting this up, even with just the tiniest of inputs really, because all this has is the down forward and one throw. There's nothing else in here. Similarly, slot 7 is just forward to down. So, why is all of this happening? 1, input readers are complicated, and 2, by combining the two and having the game phase from one into the other, it will treat them all as one input and do various different things. So, it wasn't necessary to do anything else. If you understand that an uppercut is made up of a forward to down, followed by a down forward, then putting a down forward at the beginning of an input, and a forward to down at the end of an input, will result in an uppercut, even though these two inputs themselves contain no uppercut, which can be really helpful when you don't want the uppercut to happen every time, or to be predictable. Action 4 is quite simple too. The important thing here that you probably wouldn't notice automatically is the way that the game reads dashes. If you input forward plus heavy punch at a timing when Shui is doing something else, the next tap of forward you do, provided you tapped the forward heavy punch fairly quickly, is going to dash. I'll show on the Chun-Li side. It's a little bit difficult to do this perfectly, so bear with me on that. But you can see on the screen right now that there is a certain gap between the two forward inputs that allows you to get a dash to happen. I'm not going to keep trying to get it to 7. I think I can do it on 7. I'm pretty sure if you put in with a 7 frame gap, your character will dash. There we are. And you can use that to check whether or not it's working. So it is a forward heavy punch. But there is a limit on how long you can do specific things, and it gets really complicated from there. So if you're holding this for a while and then press it, it won't work. So just try to do the forward heavy punch part quickly, like this sort of, but faster within the two. And that, for example, could manage to dash. Again, we're looking at the left side of the screen. If anything happened to make that heavy punch not be actionable, it doesn't even have to be hidden. As long as your character can't do that heavy punch, that input you just saw is a dash input. This is kind of complicated to actually do, but you don't actually care about it that much. Getting her forward dash in here is nice, but she has other ways that it comes out. Because the input is so relatively simple, the first part of it is easy, and you can just remember to tack on the quarter circle back at the end. It can be fairly slow, as demonstrated here. Slot 6, therefore, is a simple way of getting... No, I already skipped it twice. Slot 5 is a better way of getting a backdash than most things. By making it so that the entire animation of the dash, or rather the entire input of the dash, would be caught in just the animation of the medium kick, you can prevent her from backdashing normally. If I replay this by itself, it will actually do more than that though. There's a good backdash. And the change in rhythm means that she'll just keep backdashing, because now the backdash's animation is suppressing the medium kick animation. So she'll just keep this up for as long as she feels like it. This one you probably will get some information on frames. We generally don't want to give these, partially because it's misleading somewhat without the full explanation, but because this specific bot is receiving that full explanation, we're probably also going to give the frame data, or at least tell you to reference it. The reason this one works well enough is because, again, it gives us a medium kick to help with the jump, for example, to help with various fuha and other things of that type, particularly because medium fuha goes over lows. The thing you were seeing before about Cammy trying to get a mid-range confirm, she might be beaten by that same move, and so on. Slot 6, as mentioned, since the drive impact will accept any direction, it's similar to our old friend the V trigger. We often use this to get a sweep for bots because it's the perfect timing to put a sweep, especially if you put it at the beginning of the input where likely something else is animating. Since you don't want a bot to be doing its V trigger or drive impact way too often, it's better for it to just have a chance of this being hidden, but in this case we've gone one step further. Besides just putting in the really easy mid-throw to once again help her flow that way, and a quarter circle back to get even more special moves, we've explicitly put the holding of the heavy punch all until the end. If you're familiar with that, it's because it will stop the heavy punch input from mattering when it replays into itself. But in combination with that quarter circle, she ends up doing that move. There's also a secondary special condition under which she will just sweep. And as mentioned, it has to do with this. So, getting her to sweep in general is a little bit complicated. But if she's burnt out, she can't do her drive impact at all. And if you did not know, when you input two simultaneous buttons of the same strength in most, if not all, Street Fighter games, and it's supposed to activate a special ability, but it cannot for whatever reason, you will get the kick all of the time. The only change we've got now is that in this game, if you do quarter circle forward throw, you now get a throw. Before, you would get the quarter circle forward light kick move your character had. But now they have fixed this, presumably because that was actually kind of a problem sometimes, and now you will get the throw properly. But in this case, we're talking about drive impact. If she's burnt out, she cannot drive impact. And in this case, it suits us the best to have her do sweep. This input is here because we needed her to do something quick. It also helps because we wanted her to have light, i.e. the little fireball she does across the bottom of the screen version of her Fuha. But the way these moves combine can sometimes be problematic, so let's try this one. There isn't really a specific timing under which we can be sure she will do that move, and which is fine because we didn't really want her to do it that much. Which is why it ended up with less of the quarter circle being done in the direction that would cause it. But we needed the light kick, so she did it ever. So we needed something to start with a light kick. And light kick, light punch, wake up is not the greatest thing to be challenging with on your wake up, but it definitely shows a person very clearly whether or not something is wrong. It also animates quite quickly, so the whole thing can be very short, meaning that if it's absorbed into another input, that 632 at the end, that forward to down, will set up for all sorts of things. And then this nightmarish input is even harder to explain because that quarter circle back in this input isn't really doing what you would expect it to be doing. The quarter circle back in this input isn't really related to any specific thing. It's a complicated way to make her block and block specific things. If you have negative edge on, it will also cause changes in behavior for the bot, but not this time because you never let go of the button. That quarter circle back is mostly what we put in as a rhythm padding option. We know that most people, if given the instruction to press one button and hold it, and then do a quarter circle, the quarter circle is going to be somewhere between 8 and 12 frames, just because of the way that humans input things. If this isn't true for you, then find whatever will take you around that long to do. But really, it's just padding to make your mind enter a particular state. So it's not really doing anything. It could be quarter circle forward as well. But it is helpful to have it in here for that purpose, because we want about that much time between the first press of the parry and the actual drive cancel. And we want this so that she doesn't just drive cancel immediately under every situation. The rest of it is a complex interaction of other things. Obviously, we have to do the forward dash in order to get the drive cancel. But once we've gotten her this far, that's the other thing that it would normally do. That quarter circle back does something slightly different in this case. If she burns herself out entirely, it's similar to the drive impact. She can't actually do the parry or anything else related to her drive gauge. But what does that mean in terms of what she presses when she's just starting? It gives her a very rare chance to just hit stand medium kick. But because she generally won't do the stand medium kick, she'll generally just dash anyway. When she's burnt out, therefore, we get to a really interesting situation. The amount of time it takes for her to reach the point of the input where she is dashing from the start of the input is about 20 frames. I think it's almost exactly 20 frames. This means that from the first attempt to input the dash, there is 20 frames. Meaning that if she is dashing, chances are that you will get that quarter circle back happening, but she won't necessarily dash again. This is a bunch of complicated things that you generally don't care about, and it's also why the ending of the input isn't very important to you. But we're again just talking about bot theory here. What we want to happen is that when she does dash, because she's burnt out, that she does something after the dashing most of the time. So if I add a different input, specifically, I believe, this one, she'll still often do the dash into uppercut part. But she'll also dash into wiggling, dash into crouch blocking, and on a very specific timing, dash into using her stand medium kick. It's very difficult to get her to do this with the recording we have now, but you might have a recording where she does it more often. So these are the places where the medium kick starts to come out, where the last aspect of this input shows itself. And this can be helpful in a different way, because if we have that in there, there's a specific timing where it will help her to do her super, I think. I haven't actually checked this in detail across all attempts at making this bot, but that should probably be enough for today. So we're going to let JuryBot show off a little bit more. Burnt out or not. And you can see the number of options she has available to her and why they're important for your own training. One of the easier things to test is whether or not you can get a throw after certain knockdowns. And as you can see there, if you try to do it too much, this is why she has 2 throw inputs stored in her input set, so that she can more easily either tech throws or mess you up if you mistime your own throw. With all that rhythm in place, she also won't have the tendency to jump as much, except if you've already interacted with her correctly in some other way. And she jumps even less when she's burnt out. So being ready for her jumps is, at least thankfully, difficult enough that you have to care. It's particularly meaningful when you've got that spacing where you're kind of thinking you might make it in time to throw, but you're not sure. So hopefully it'll be of some help to you in setting up various things you want. And if not that much, at least just getting some basic practice in against this type of character. But I believe that brings us more or less to the end of the stream for the night. Let us know if your jury bot doesn't perform up to whatever you consider spec to be, and we might be able to give you some help with it, since she tends to be the type of character where you can work out what's wrong with the bot some other way. The bot will be released on our website 2-mk.org under our SF6-bots section, probably on Sunday, when we've finished all secondary testing. You can find all of our other bots released so far for this game, or all of the other games that we've made them for, at said website 2-mk.org, along with one or two other bits of information you can use for other types of training, or getting used to you making your own in some way if these ones don't suit you for whatever reason. But with that said, this has been Rillian142MK. Thank you for watching this disc guidance / robotics lab. Good luck with your training and good night everyone.